Now, in the next few videos, we're going to be creating a simple feature of JavaScript of the hover feature. So if I hover over the contact button, the helpful text shows up. If I move away from it, the helpful text disappears. If I go over about, the about button, some text shows up. Same for home and so forth. So although this is a very simple feature, this example is going to show us some depths about closures. We're going to learn some new features of JavaScript, and it's going to really embed some of the concepts much more deeper. Even though this is a simple example, the constructs remain the same, and the more advanced applications you make, these ideas, these concepts that I'm teaching you are going to keep on coming back, and things don't get even more complicated. Things don't get more complicated than that. So with that said, I've already shown you the demonstration. Let me show you what the code, the starter code you're going to have, and then we're going to write our JavaScript from scratch. Okay? So to get started, the reason this document looks so beautiful is, first of all, I have a simple HTML document with, in the body element, I have the nav element. Inside the nav, I have three buttons: home, about, and contact. They have no hrefs attached to it. Basically, it has the hash sign. So if I click over here, nothing happens. I also have three IDs attached to it: home, about, and contact. And they have the same class of btn so that they are styled in the same manner. I also have a div with the class of help-text, and I have styled all of this in CSS. And since this is not a CSS course, I'm not going to go in depth of what is written over here, but it's actually, CSS is very straightforward. This, if you study this document, you're going to really understand that nothing is complicated. Nothing complicated is going on over here. So now if I go to my app.js, I'm going to simply remove all of this code, save, and now refresh. And I need to zoom in, I think. And you see the hover effect is gone. Sorry, the helpful text effect is gone, but this hover effect is coming from CSS. So we're basically going to make that feature of showing that particular text over here. Now I'm going to revert back and go to our app.js, and I'm going to remove most of the major code over here at the bottom, and we're going to go from scratch. Do not worry about what I'm deleting, because the only reason I have it over here is just to show you what the end result is going to be like. Now I'm going to start off with this piece of code. Now in our previous videos, we have already seen that when you are importing your style.css, sorry, your script file, in our case app.js, if you want your app.js to be on the top, you don't want your DOM manipulation to work until the DOM content is loaded. So the DOM gives us an event called DOM content loaded. So I say document.add event listener. When the DOM content loaded event is triggered, then only run this callback function. And you see over here, I'm using the arrow function because that's a perfect place to use an arrow function over here. So that's our starting point. Another thing I'm doing over here is I've created an object, and this object is simply, sorry, I've created an array, which is simply an array filled with three objects. So before we go into the details of what is this object for, what is this array for, let's understand the thought process, the mental thought process of how would we code the feature of making the helpful text appear when I hover over these buttons. So let's say if I were to think about it, what would I type over here? Taking notes, right? So one way to do it is, let's say I can attach a click handler or event handler, let's call it event handler, on each of these buttons, on each button, and on mouse enter event, because that's an event if you have studied the event reference in Mozilla. If mouse enters in this area, then we want to show the text inside the help-text element. So if you go over here, there's a div I've created over here. So we're going to simply place some text over here. That's all we need to do. So it's actually a not complicated example. So why are we actually even talking about it? We're going to see. So another thing we want to do is, let's say on mouse leave event. So when the mouse leaves from that particular button, then we want to set the text to an empty string, right? So that's going to disappear. That's going to make that particular text appear as nothing, which is like such right now. Okay, so it's not really complicated. Now here's the complicated part. The complicated part is that when you are creating this particular functionality for multiple of these buttons. So in our simple example, we only have 3 buttons. But let's say if you were making a website, let's say Facebook, or you were working for Quora, and they have a number of links, right? Maybe on the left-hand side, maybe on the header, maybe on the footer, right? It could be anywhere, and all these buttons have a similar effect of the hover effect. A lot of times this is also called a tooltip. So when you actually hover over a button, a tooltip appears, right? So let's say if you wanted to implement that. What would you do is, we have learned that if you want to do something multiple times, you actually use a loop. So a loop would go through, find all, first of all, you'll find all the buttons that you want to apply the event handler to, and then you would loop through each of these elements and then attach the event handler on each of the iteration. So that would be the way to do it. So we would have some kind of loop to go over all the buttons and attach the event handler each time. Okay, so that's it. So now let's get started into coding. But before we do that, what I've done over here is I've created an array called help text list. And this has the list of IDs of the buttons. So it's home, ID about, ID contact, and the corresponding helpful text that we want to display. So text, you're already on home, text, get the home about info, get the info about us, and connect with us. So these are just text that will display on these corresponding buttons. Now the first tip that I want to give you for a programmer is that when you're creating a sophisticated application, or even a simple application as such that we're going to create right now, you organize a lot of your data inside objects, simple objects. And you've learned from our cheat sheet. Let's see if I can find our cheat sheet over here. Make this big. If I go to our first page, you're going to see that an object is simply a collection of key value pairs. So you can actually organize your data in this particular fashion. So you're organizing one piece of information, the second piece of information, the third piece of information, and since this information is the same category, you can put it in an array. So you're organizing your data in a flat format, and then you use that data with your programming logic to build your features. So you're going to see what I mean over here. So that's the introduction to get started. In the next video, we're going to start coding and create this feature. Talk to you in the next lesson.